Hello there, and welcome back to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave, your faithful servant, your earhole invader. And we're on episode 6 of season 3, which is episode 46 overall. Jesus Christ, I've been talking to this microphone for 46 episodes, give or take a couple of the interviews that I put from West Coast Davengers onto here to give myself a little break. But we are all filler, no killer. Or nope, no filler, all killer. I don't know. I'm trying to bring 20 original episodes to the podcast for this season. With that comes me just calling an audible. Sorry that this isn't a 4K episode. I didn't feel like setting up the camera. I'm just microphone, me, you. Let's talk. This is my first kind of like catching up. This is a full just let's talk episode. So things might get dicey. I'm gonna try not to go too dark. Times today is February 5th, and I don't even know how to exist right now without not addressing the fact that a bunch of billionaires and an orange asshole are trying to dismantle America as we know it. Whether they're doing it or not, whether it's a lot of distraction, but you know, they got at the Department of Education yesterday. So if you have kids, I am sorry. I just hope that you understand that you can instill more in your children than any school ever will. So be good to them. And, just teach them right and wrong. It's really not that hard. Anyway, last week you listened to me talking about my comfort movies. I asked people to chime in. Let me know what your comfort movies are. And that's still ongoing, but the initial ones we'll talk about today. Just some people that put some stuff in the comments, and I'm looking at you, Rob McCallum. Speaking of Rob McCallum and his choice, let's just give a shout out to the legend, rest in peace, David Lynch. Passed away a couple weeks ago. He had emphysema. He was a lifelong smoker, and he knew what he was doing. But still, it doesn't take away from the fact that his impact is gigantic. It's huge. It's going to, much like a Bowie, it's going to last generation after generation, because the people that I'm a David Lynch fan. I would never say that I'm like a super devotee, but I've seen pretty much everything he ever did. My favorite thing being either Twin Peaks or Lost Highway. Lost Highway is one of those movies that, funny story, I told this to a couple people, when David passed away. I believe Lost Highway comes out in 97, maybe 98. Either way, I was either my senior year of high school or I just graduated high school. And me and my friend Andrea, we were big fans of Nine Inch Nails, grew up together, me and her, known each other since kindergarten, and we were always big Nine Inch Nails fans. And so when Lost Highway was announced and coming out, Trent's doing music. You got the single Perfect Drug. The soundtrack comes out, and we used to bump it a lot in the car. And that soundtrack is a huge thing too, because not only does it have, Trent, Nails, Bowie, Manson, but it also introduced the American world to a German band called Rammstein. Du hast. There were 2 tracks on the Lost Highway soundtrack, I believe. One was called Rammstein, and it was, I forget what the other one was. Anyway, so the movie was coming out, and we were excited to go see it. Honestly, I think I had never seen a David Lynch movie in the theater. My parents showed me Raising Arizona when I was a kid, and then I sought out Wild Heart to see more Nick Cage movies. But Twin Peaks, I remember watching when it was on TV, and I watched the first episode. I remember getting panned. People were like, "What is this? This is too weird," whatever. So me and my friend Andrea were like, "Oh, we're gonna go see Lost Highway when it comes out," and we convinced 3 of our friends, maybe more, but it was definitely at least 3, to go see Lost Highway when it came out. And that movie's weird, obviously. It's Lynch. It's visually stunning. It's acted great. Music, whatever, all that. But we very, very much pissed off our 3 or 4, or however many friends came with us. Were very angry at us. Why did you make us go see that? What the fuck was that? You know, it's Lynch. And then, you know, I just appreciated him for so many other reasons. He was an artist that stuck to his guns. He didn't compromise his vision. He was, you know, the movies and TV shows that he had bit parts or bigger parts in, you know, he's fun to watch act. And he's, you know, during the pandemic, he was doing these daily weather reports on YouTube. I think he did it for like 2.5 years in a row. And it was just like, he's a charming guy and a great guy, or a great, you know, seeming guy. Anyway, rest in peace to the legend. You will not be forgotten. And also, your art will live well past most of our lives. Twin Peaks alone is enough to, you know, set somebody's legacy in stone. So yeah, that just wanted to say that. Felt like wearing the shirt today and paying a little tribute. Also, a fellow David. I just got back from Orlando and Southern Florida as well. I went to Original Art Expo OAX 2025, second year, bigger, better, run by comic art fans. It's all about original art, illustration, you know, in 3 different sectors: comics, then actual painting, you know, illustration, and trading card art. For anybody that actually has any passing interest in comic art, it's a great, you know, convention to go to. And for anybody that's into buying art, it's the best in the States. I had a great time. I put a little critique on my, and not much of a critique, but a little bit of a critique on my YouTube video. I did about an hour video. It's the hardest I've ever worked creating content thus far. Aside from interviews, because that takes hours and hours of research. And I want to make sure that I respect anybody that's coming on my, my show or my podcast. But I made sure to film a lot of stuff, and it was a very overwhelming weekend. Mixed emotions for so many different reasons, because I visited my parents after. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but and I don't like Florida for obvious reasons why anybody that doesn't live in Florida doesn't like Florida, and it's not just the weather. The only reason I like Florida is because the wildlife. So yeah, so I put a little bit of a critique on that. The YouTube episode's doing okay. I got a couple of yahoos, you know, chiming in with their unsolicited, shitty viewpoints. One person on Facebook was, you know, I post on Facebook just to promote the videos and the podcast. And I typically, you know, I do actually, I'm not going to fucking lie. I enjoy engaging sometimes with stupid people. When it's something that's like not hate-filled, it's just like somebody being an idiot, I'm happy to engage and usually put them in their place or try. And I think it's because I was bullied a lot when I was a young kid, even until, you know, maybe I was 18 and I went to my first year of college. I just always dealt with shitty people, and I didn't deal with it well when I was younger. So now I'm smarter. I'm funnier than most people. I'm a whatchamacallit. I'm a sarcastic motherfucker, and I'll go back at anybody with words because it's just words, right? And I won't insult somebody, but somebody on Facebook was like, "Oh, this is this original art con is aimed for elitists and big rollers and people that have tons and tons of money." I'm like, no, it's not actually. It's aimed for everybody. That's why they do a 90-minute free sketch session where you can literally go up to 5 or as many artists as you can get up to and get free sketches, which these days, remarks, you know, like little head sketches on a comic book or on a sketchbook cost sometimes up to $70, $300, depending on the artist. A free sketch, which most of these guys actually do more than just a little sketch. I mean, like, you can't get free sketches at conventions anymore. You haven't been able to since the late 90s, early 2000s. So just for that alone is great. But there are artists that brought in cheap art. Like apparently Jimmy Palmiotti brought in a box of pages and they were like 25 or $50 each. Anyway, this guy tried to make an accusation that was false. It was false because now that I've been there 2 years, I can say that is empirically false. And so I said something like, that's wrong, and I noted the free sketch thing. And he said, well, you're just saying that because you're biased, because you have a relationship with the people that ran it. And so I had to put him in his place and be like, dude, last year I went to OAX in its first year. I gushed about how good it was. I didn't actually know Kazra. I didn't even become friendly with Kazra until 6 months after. So stop telling me that you know me better than I know me. And I think it's, like some people are like, oh, you shouldn't engage. And I'm like, well, why not? I'm not going to just fucking sit there like, I don't look at the comments. Of course I look at the comments. I'm a human being. If I put something out there creatively, and I honestly, I don't believe anybody, unless they're like some, person that can live in, in isolation from it, or they're so famous or they're so big that they can't physically look at all the comments. I am just me, and I do. And I would almost call bullshit on anybody that's not a mega star person that says, oh, I put content out there and I don't look at the comments. Come on. It's not true. And I don't think it's unhealthy because, like, if you're putting out basically, like, positive stuff into the air, whether it's art, whether it's podcasts, whether it's writing, if you're putting positive stuff out there, stuff that's like not negative leaning, why wouldn't you want to see the positivity that you get back? We live off energy. I mean, sorry, I didn't come from an environment that was super positive at all when I was younger. I just was never around people that were encouraging and positive. It's the truth. And so now that I'm doing something that I'm super proud of, I want to see the fruits of my labor. I want to see if it affects people in a positive way, because then it makes me want to keep doing it. Otherwise, I'm just sitting there in the dark, putting stuff out there, not having conversations with people, not talking to people about whatever it is. I'm not sitting here, stroking my ego because I'm fucking absolutely full of doubt and whatchamacallit, imposter syndrome. But also at the same time, like, I have no problem saying that the OAX video that I put out there, that Joe helped with the editing, he did the editing, so he helped with this video and helped me kind of fine tune the narrative. I think that's one of the best things I've put out there, period. Since I've been doing this. I mean, the interviews I think are the peak. That's the top for me. Like, because I'm super into talking to people. I have 2 podcasts. Of course, I'm into talking, period. Yeah, I was super, super happy with that. So anyway, I went back with that guy on Facebook, and then he didn't say anything because what's he going to say? You're lying. You've known Kazra since the beginning. Maybe I should do that voice all the time when I'm pretending that I'm somebody on the internet. Hello, I'm internet anonymous asshole. And so then today, somebody chimed in. I saw this comment when I went into my YouTube that you flip past a Frazetta, and there was some other artists. A couple people called me out for like glazing over. And I'm just like, man, imagine you're in a room with millions of dollars of amazing art and you're trying to take it all in over the course of 2 days and be aware to film and maybe, pay attention to the fact that there's people around me. And this guy was like, it's a disgrace. I didn't respond because there's no response to that. Like, my first thought is to respond, I'm sorry, Steven Spielberg's life has been taken. I am not him. But it just doesn't matter. Some days you do. Some days you don't. It's like an Almond Joy, right? Or a Mounds, with the comments. I overall had a great time. I did. I was supposed to go see the band Sparta play while I was in Orlando. And it was I was run ragged that weekend, and then I ended up getting sick on in between leaving Orlando and driving down to my parents in South Florida. And then when I got to their house, the whatever food poisoning that was like slowly running through me accelerated. And I won't give you any of the gory details, but I will say this. I haven't had food poisoning. It's been so long that I can't remember. At the beginning of 2020, when COVID started to, really shoot up, and by March we were in lockdown, I had gotten sick at the end of 2019. It wasn't COVID. For those of you that have kids that I don't, somehow I managed to contract hand, foot, mouth disease, and adults getting it is like 15 times worse than when a kid gets it. But anyway, so COVID hits, and I start working with the post office training April of 2020, and then boots on the ground May. I hadn't gotten sick at all. No cold, no stomach stuff, no, my anxiety manifests in my stomach, but that's not getting sick. No strep throat, nothing, no COVID. And then I went to the UK summer of 2023 and came home with COVID. That was the first time I had gotten sick with anything in 3+ years. Then, since then, I hadn't gotten sick after that. I haven't gotten COVID again, not even minor cold, nothing. People are getting the colds going around, the strep throats going around, nothing. And it's partially because I work at home. I stick to not spending too much time in crowded places or group places or whatever, go to the occasional concert or whatever. But so I get this food poisoning on Sunday, driving to my parents, and that sucks. So anyway, the Monday that I was recovering, I don't remember it at all. Like, I got out of bed, I had some breakfast, I got back in bed. I think I went to the grocery store to get like chicken soup and stuff because I was feeling better, but I have like no memory of this. It felt like I was sick for 2.5, 3 days. I was sick for like 30 hours. And then I thought it was better. I went home. I was going home, and it was the day that 9 Inch Nails tickets went on sale. So I had gone to a coffee shop in Fort Lauderdale that I really like to go to, called Wells Coffee. And I had sat in there for like 2.5 hours trying to get 9 Inch Nails tickets. 3 shows they announced in the Pacific Northwest: Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, Canada. I was only able to get a single ticket in Vancouver, Canada. So it's their first tour in however many years, and it's the first time I'll be seeing them in 7 years. I still plan on getting tickets for the other shows, but I'll figure it out. So I had coffee. I had like a little pastry. I just started not feeling good. And man, that flight sucked. Whatever food poisoning I'd gotten had just gone up here and was acid reflux for like 5 straight hours. I don't know. But anyway, being sick sucks. Florida sucks. Sorry, Florida. But OAX was cool. So, I'm literally yapping to the mic today. I have no clue what I'm going to end up really saying. It's kind of like every fucking politician. I did put a Q&A. I realize that the audience for this podcast is not that huge. I want to also say thanks again to Scheme, DJ Scheme Richards, Alex Barty for doing those interviews 2 weeks in a row. You guys got some new people looking at this podcast, and those are 2 people that I will hopefully have on again, because me and Scheme ain't done talking about all the shit that we want to talk about, and me and Alex still got to talk about some Todd McFarlane and his toy output. So thank you all to the new subscribers for coming through. And this podcast serves as it's like a double thing. It's a place for me to just kind of talk, and hopefully it's interesting to you. Hopefully you can find something that I'm talking about interesting. I'm not trying to talk about me the whole time, but whatever I'm doing in my life, I'm trying to at least talk about that and then expand. I had asked on YouTube like 2 weeks ago, like, are there any questions that my audience has? And I can answer them here on the podcast, which was what I was hoping, is to get a couple of different questions. Maybe it's like, yo, what'd you think about this movie or whatever? And then like kind of expand upon that. I realize that my audience isn't there yet for that. And it may never be. It may never be one of those podcasts where people have questions for me, which doesn't hurt my feelings. Trust me. Doesn't. But I got really no questions that I was like, oh, this is something I should talk about on the podcast. No, and Derek Strom put a question that was more comics related about my business, which I don't know. Like, if there was an episode I was going to talk about the business side of things, I think it would fit in there. So, Derek, I will keep that question for a later date when I'm feeling like diving into an hour of me talking about how I find collections, buy collections, the mindset that goes into when I'm buying one, and then how I'm going to recoup my money and all that. But it's just not something I want to address yet on the podcast, or today at least. But I will say I did get some great feedback on the movies that I asked people, tell me about their comfort movies, and talking about The Social Network. Jamie said something on Spotify in the comment section about how that's a movie that he goes back to a lot. And we've got Red Right Hand Net on YouTube, which assume that is a Nick Cave reference, which I love that song. And I was introduced to that song in a movie, as a lot of people were that weren't Nick Cave listeners. But anyway, he said he agreed that Social Network, Fincher, Sorkin are and Reznor are favorites of his. And The Social Network blew his mind when it happened, and it was a comfort movie for a while. Let me just talk about Red Right Hand real quick. It's a Nick Cave song. I don't know how old it is. I mean, I'm assuming it's from the late 80s, early 90s, but I first heard it in the first Scream, which came out in 96. And I only knew who Nick Cave was by name. I don't know if I had known like his actual music and like who he was. But that, I just love it when a song is in a movie that like exists before the movie, and it's not made specifically for the movie, but it like opens this whole gateway to knowing who someone is and their musical output. So yeah, great song, great movie. Scream, top. I would put that in my top 10 horror movies of all time. Like, that's a movie that just never, I always see something new, or it's something like I notice in the first, couple of times I saw it that I forget. And then 25 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Art by Surge. 3 favorite comfort movies are Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indy, my boy. The first TMNT movie, and one of my personal favorite movies of all time, RoboCop. Your move, creep. I got to thank my dad for that. Took me to see it in the movie theater. Came out in 87, 88. So I'm like 8, 9 years old. Definitely should not have seen that movie that young. Definitely affected me for multiple ways. One I'm not going to talk about because I don't party like that anymore, which is your hint. And I just made me love that kind of movie, like schlocky action, great movie, Paul Verhoeven, but also such a great commentary on, military, police, corporate police, and where we are now. He definitely put some things out in the air that have come true and still are coming true. And it is just like, if you take it at just that face value of like, this is a kind of, a great R-rated action movie, satirical as hell though. I'm concerned, but in the best way possible, for our friend Rob McCallum, because Eraserhead is one of his comfort movies. And, well, I think that we just leave it right there. David Lynch, Eraserhead. Yeah. And then our friend Derek, Brute NM on YouTube. I'm a sucker for anything Coen Brothers. He mentions No Country, True Grit, Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Oh Brother, Fargo, and then obviously he picked his number one in that world is The Big Lebowski, which Lebowski's a movie that I was late to. I had friends that were watching it and saw it when it came out in the 90s, and they'd talk about it, and it's definitely like a piece of indie music friends crossing over to loving that movie. And I saw it some point in the late 90s. I didn't see it in the theater. I want to say it came out like 96, 97. Let's see. 98. So I must have seen it like early 2000, then 2000, 2001. And I liked it. I love all the players in it. You can't beat John Goodman and Jeff Bridges. But I did not, I feel like there were devotees to that movie, people that quoted the dude all the time. And I watched it again, I don't know, maybe like in the late first decade of the 2000s. And that's when it clicked for me. I've seen all the other Coen Brothers movies. Like I said earlier, I saw Raising Arizona very young. Might have even seen it in the theater. I didn't see Blood Simple and whatever the other first one is, the early ones, till later on. But then I started seeing them as they came out. I saw True Grit in the theater. I saw Oh Brother in the theater. Definitely saw No Country for Old Men in the theater. And the Coen Brothers and Fargo. I didn't see Fargo in the theater, but I definitely saw it early on. They are, once again, it's like Tarantino. It's like Fincher. Like they are their own island that influence a shit ton of people, or like a Paul Thomas Anderson or a Wes Anderson. They are, people will cite 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of their movies. The Coen Brothers, though, are like the kind of the pinnacle, the top of that, being that they've been doing it since the 80s. I also really like to talk about how good Fargo the show is, which was, obviously based on a vibe of the movie. I want to say it was produced by them, and Noah Hawley's the showrunner and the creator. Just such an excellent show. Every season just gets kind of like, it's a little different. It's better, or, like the same, but there's no real bad seasons. This most recent one with John Hamm might have been my favorite season. The first one, though, is great, where Billy Bob and Martin Freeman. What is Colin Hanks in the first one? Anyway, if you've never seen Fargo, it's on FX. Pick a season, give it a watch. There's relationships to characters in each season, but nothing has to do with anything else. Like I feel like the second season deals with maybe there's a cousin of somebody in the first season, something like that. Anyway, a fantastic show, and obviously inspired by the vibe that the Coen Brothers put down with the first original with Frances McDormand and William H. Macy, Steve Buscemi. Classic movie. And then, Lebowski's got, it's called Following, and it's a big following now, and great soundtrack. And Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is a fantastic movie that I don't think you could replicate. Anybody could make a movie like that. Damn, we're in a tight spot. And then No Country, one of the greatest villains in Javier Bardem's character of all time. And just, the Coen Brothers keep putting a classic down after a classic. Even, I don't remember much about Serious Man. I remember The Lady Killers got panned, but I found some charm in that movie. Ballad of Buster Scruggs was great. That was their Netflix movie. The Tom Waits short, or segment in that is my favorite of all of them. So that it was nice to get some responses to that. I'm actually going to post another piece of content for that on Instagram today and see if I can get some more interest in that episode. Problem is that I think the lack of focus of this podcast keeps it getting growth on the non-interviews. And I understand that, but I just can't seem to get interviews quick enough. Like, I've got another one scheduled in a couple weeks, and I've reached out to some people. It's just tough. It's tough because I'm nobody, and I don't have any advertising or anything. So you'll just have to bear with me while I still figure it out. 46 episodes is still kind of in its infancy, but anybody has any tips, I'm always ears. Always ears. See? So yeah, that is my goal is to still turn this into a full-on interview podcast. So that it's a lofty goal. I daydream of it. I daydream of where this podcast can go. And there's people I want to interview, and there's things I want to talk about. Like, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, you shouldn't voice your political stuff." And I'm going to try to keep this, like I said, positive, but right now it's really tough. And I think if anybody is having trouble struggling with those things, you can disconnect. And a great way to disconnect is to get into a movie or get into a comic or a book or an album, somebody else's art to take away. Speaking of, I wanted to just mention this because I don't think I've talked about it too much on this podcast. The Many Faces of Jack Kirby was a zine that I came up with a concept for and brought it to Mr. Andrew, who is the person that helps me write synopsis and titles for this podcast and has been a constant source of advice and counsel on just, being a good friend. Anyway, we published this first zine last year. The Many Faces of Jack Kirby is a tribute to the way that Jack Kirby, the creator of the Marvel Universe and creator of so many characters in the Marvel Universe, the way that he used to draw these real close-up faces and different emotions and different shadows on the face. And I never thought that I would get into making a comic or a zine. I thought about it years and years ago, but didn't know just how. And then the how is you just fucking make it. And I came to Andrew with this concept, and he was on board with it from day one and helped as the designer, and basically took that idea and shaped it into a thing that we worked on after months of doing some edits and stuff like that. We just published our second one, The Many More Faces of Jack Kirby, so it's volume 2. Possibly will be a 3-volume set eventually. Who knows? Trilogies don't always need to happen. Sequels don't always need to happen, but this one definitely did. And I just still sit here and I'm like, oh, that's right. I made this thing with my friend. In being involved with comics my whole life, never thought that I would start creating anything. But zine culture has always fascinated me, and further out from that, macro is something that I've been kind of talking about as I pitch interviews. Fandom has always been a part of my life and has always fascinated me because fandom is where all of this comes from. Like, comic books survived with and almost exclusively with the help of fandom. Fandom starts the first comic conventions. Fandom starts the first comic interview magazine. So fandom in comics, but also like think about the same culture in music. Fandom is some of the reasons why music has gotten discovered. People putting it on a mix or people playing it on their radio show or writing about it in, fanzines, because fanzines existed in music. Kind of in tandem with comics and fantasy and science fiction. There are people that got their start. I feel like George R.R. Martin is one of those big examples of somebody that was a huge fan, used to write a lot of fan letters. I don't know if he did fanzines, But you can see George R.R. Martin's letters in early Fantastic Four issues, and look at where he went. I'm sure George Lucas was part. I don't know if he ever wrote any letters, but he was definitely involved in being part of the fan. Like he was a fan of so many things that he ends up kind of curating before he makes Star Wars, and that George Lucas Museum is going to be a huge showcase of that. I'm sure there's a lot of musicians I don't know that would be pioneers in the fan scene. But anyway, it's and then making like bootleg 45s and selling them for the bands, whatever. It's just fandom. What it used to be was a lot more wholesome than what people can consider fandom now, because fandom has turned toxic. Fandom is, I talked about that last season, has such a huge megaphone. But anyway, getting back to this, I never thought that this was something I was going to do, even though it's something that I've always kind of been part of. And I don't know if there's going to be a point where I write something and publish it. I did start writing like a bit of a book, maybe like 10 years ago, about my life as an autograph collector. And kind of that was my piece of my fandom. I was not, shoving cameras in people's faces and being rude. It was like, I live in New York and I run with a lot of, I have a friend group with a lot of people that collect autographs, and naturally I get invited to go into New York City. Like, oh, Dave, come with us. We're going to go see if we can meet the Foo Fighters at Letterman. And then it was be like, oh, Foo Fighters are on Stern, so let's go in the morning and wait for them outside the studio. And lo and behold, that was a very easy way to access people. And then it was like, oh, wait after shows. And then it became this thing where I'm like, well, I'm an adult and I drink, and I can always see like, oh, I could go see a small band, and then who knows, maybe I'll buy the band a drink or something. And that's how I met Scott Hutchison from Frightened Rabbit. And that's, and it's so weird. Like, I never was super nervous to go up to people. This, like, the first 15 seconds of that interaction, I was nervous, and then I wasn't anymore. So, like, meeting Vetter for the first time, I was nervous, but then second time, I wasn't, I was never nervous meeting certain people, though. Like Dave Grohl, very approachable human being. It's something that I think about now, like, okay, now that I've got these 2 zines under my belt with Andrew, what am I going to do next? And what are we going to do next? So just wanted to talk about that a bit. You can check out photos from this and pre-order it on my website, westcoastdavengers.com. There's a section on the website for that, as well as there's a section on the website to listen to episodes of this and subscribe on your favorite platform of subscribing. Yeah. So I think that's just kind of got it out of my system. Wanted to talk, wanted to chat, wanted to catch up, and I've been working a lot, and it's interesting. I don't find doing this podcast to be too much work, even though it is. It just has to come, like, I got to hit the record button when I feel like it. If it's an interview, so much easier to just be like, okay, we'll do my research, get my questions down, get this interview, and have a good conversation. But it's a little bit harder some days where you're just like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Is it interesting? Am I going to just talk about the same shit over and over? Which I'm trying not to. And that's why I'm saving certain things for certain episodes. The autograph collecting, probably will do a 90-minute episode on it. The business side of the comic stuff that Derek asked about, I'll probably do a full hour on that when I'm feeling like talking about it. Before we get going, I wanted to read a review from Don, D-O-N-N. I think it's Don Davis, who left this review in December on Apple. I've been watching West Coast Davengers YouTube channel for almost 2 years now, and discovered this channel searching for interviews with cartoonists. Now I have been working my way through his podcast and enjoying them. Thanks for keeping me company while I'm drawing, Dave, and keep the episodes coming. well done. Thank you very much for the kind review. That was on Apple. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to say this just briefly. Like I said, I'm not going to harp on it. There is a lot of dark days coming. There are. Just the last 5 days have shown us that we cannot rest on our laurels and we cannot give in to what they want us to give into, which is keeping us under a depressed iron foot. I'm going to keep doing this podcast as long as I can. I'm going to keep talking because I understand I sit around all day, and when I'm working on comics or whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to put a podcast. I'm trying to put something on to keep me company, something that I enjoy listening to. And if I can provide that for someone else, just one person, that's great. If it's multiple people, hell yeah. So thank you for that. And please, if you can, just take time out of your day. If you're on Apple, leave a review. Spotify, drop a star rating. You scroll up to the top of my podcast page. If you haven't, it'll be up there. You can also comment on Spotify and YouTube. Obviously, you can hit the like button and you can drop a comment. I'm just trying to be me, and if you're into listening to me talk, then thank you. I appreciate it. Once again, this is Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave. Have a great week. Stay safe, keep your head up, and fight the power.